The Open Highway podcast is a production of Viking Dog Entertainment, and now you can visit the all-new Viking Dog store for access to everything that Viking Dog has to offer. Movies, books, and apparel, including motivational lines, open highway merchandise, and exclusive wolf designs that raise money for wolf rescue organizations. So visit thevikingdogstore.com today.
Hello, great minds! Mr. DGMH here, but wait, what the hell is DGMH? DGMH, or Drinks with Great Minds in History, is a weekly podcast that covers one of history's greatest minds each month, while we enjoy, review, and rate themed cocktails, liquors, and beers on the scale of greatness. As greats like Alexander Hamilton square off against George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and more, DGMH is the perfect cocktail of history, sarcasm, and alcohol, with a twist of psych and a bunch of shots along the way. So grab yourself a drink with some great minds in history. Cheers!
Entertaining? I don't know. Sometimes I don't know.
You know, I got a lot of positive feedback on our last episode, so I have to think so.
Well, that's why I brought you back. What kind of feedback did you get?
They love the interview. They and it wasn't really my part of it that they were super excited about. But so like I have a lot of friends on Facebook and they like my little quirky stuff that I post.
Yeah.
And when I put up this, you know, our episode, I got a lot of feedback, which I normally don't get. They're like, oh, well, you're a weird guy and you're a nerd and we accept that about you. But like I had people who are not effusive in their praise go, oh my God, that was one of the best episodes I ever heard. Like my friend who's the Marine. He said, I've just never heard an interview that good in anywhere, radio, podcasting, whatever. And he's not a guy who gives out praise easily.
Really? Well, you know that you are the top downloaded episode of the entire show so far.
Am I really?
You are. I'm not going to throw out specific numbers because it's nobody's business, but you are the number one downloaded episode. So see, I don't know how that happened.
Well, but I think this is the key aspect for the side road is what works and what doesn't, and what was it about our episode that, you know, because, you know, like I got a bump after it too, which means there was crossover, right? I think some of my people went to go listen to your show and vice versa. And, you know, anything that works, we always have to kind of turn around, look back at it and go, well, why was that successful?
Well, yeah. And for those of you who are listening, make sure you listen to the special side road episode that we're going to do. But the odd thing is, you know, you've known me at this point. I love history. I don't think I'm as much of a nut job about freak. It. I was going to say freak. I don't want to get canceled.
All right, yeah.
But I'm not as much as you are. You are definitely a different level, but I don't think I'm that far below that.
Oh no.
But I'm definitely up there. But it's just some of the shows that I thought would be really, really interesting and take off, I was wrong about. Other ones that like ours, I knew from the get-go. I'm like, because we started getting into this whole political discussion and we started like tying it back, and that's what people have responded to me about, is they're like, you guys were able to tie the present with the past, and that's how people kind of went. That's what they told me. Plus they just said we had a really good back and forth, and
I mean, that
yell
was
at each other.
Well, that was the feedback I got, and you know, the people who've known me a long time say that I'm not to be left unsupervised. And so in the presence, well, but this is where your control of the show is important. And, you know, I've listened to all your episodes by this point. And so this is the thing that you keep doing with your guests is you keep them pointed at the topic, and you are able to get things out of them that I feel like they wouldn't otherwise just do on their own. And you know, like you can take a mediocre guest and elevate them, which I got to say you've done on several of your episodes, where Yeah, I've never stopped listening to one of your episodes. I've never been like, oh, I'm done with this. I'm not going to listen to it again. I listen to every single one of them all the way through because they are interesting, beginning to end.
Oh, that's a seal of approval.
Well, and that's I mean, short attention span America does not want to sit for an hour and a half, right? And if they do, you're doing something right. So
it's not easy sometimes. I mean, and I want to save some of this for the side road episode, but it's definitely there's some people guest wise who are very ingrained into how they think they need to present themselves or what they've seen or what they've been taught, or I have to get my promotional lines out. And it's like, once you can get that out of the way and they run out of things to say, then it's great. Then it's like, okay, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? Right. And I think one of the moments that I enjoy most is when they start asking me questions, and then they go back and forth. And that's when you're having that real conversation. That's when you're having that discussion.
I think, like after your interview about dating, people are now like,
God, did you listen to that?
I did.
Oh, God.
And people are like, what is it that you do in the produce aisle? What is going on amidst the vegetables? Is it heavily toward gourds or is it just the leafy green stuff? Like,
I'm more of a leafy green guy.
More of a leafy green guy.
Maybe that's what my problem is. Maybe I need to head over to the gourd section.
Well, right. Then you attract it depends what kind of women are hanging out in gourds, right? But your involvement in the show is as interesting as your guest's contribution.
Yeah.
And that makes it the listener wins either way, because they're either interested in what the guest is talking about, or they're interested in what you do and what you have to add to it.
Well, then I'm doing something. Then that's what I set out to do. So I'm on the right road. Like you haven't had a chance yet because we're recording this before it aired. But I interviewed Suzanne Munson, who writes this book. Well, no, she didn't write it. She calls herself the scribe. It's called The Metaphysical Thomas Jefferson. And basically what it was is she was in contact with a medium who channeled Thomas Jefferson, interviewed him for over 8 hours with questions that she solicited from professors and historic scholars without telling them what exactly was going on. So as a host and a skeptic, I'm listening to this, but as a history buff, I'm also fascinated by it.
Right.
So it's a difficult balance, and I think I achieved it, but it was a difficult balance to not be like, okay, well, I don't believe what you're telling me, but I'm going to be a good host about it. No, you kind of fall into this like, well, what if?
Well, and did you have that problem with the UFO episode too, though?
That was different, though, because he was a host and he even said like he was a skeptic. I mean, this is a woman who literally, when you listen to the episode, she first got into it because she contacted her dead husband. And she followed that up, and she's a believer. And then she is also a historian and a researcher. So she said, hey, who would I want to talk to? And she approached all of these scholars and said, if you could talk to Thomas Jefferson, what would you ask him?
Oh, that's interesting.
And they were interesting answers. Like, who would you reach out to? If you could have anybody, who would you go after?
Honestly,
I once had Millard Fillmore, please.
No, Millard Fillmore's a loser. I had an idea for a novel about the great grandson of Alexander Hamilton, who essentially gets possessed by Hamilton in modern times, so that you get Alexander Hamilton kind of looking around at modern America going, what exactly happened here? So he would be the guy I'd want to talk to. Hamilton and I have the same birthday. And so when I study Hamilton, I'm like, yeah, I'd do that.
That's who you got.
Yeah.
Hamilton. Look, he's got a musical. You got to give him a psychic too. You got it, really?
Yeah. Well, okay. So maybe, so if not Hamilton.
That's what you go ask him. What'd you think of the musical?
Yeah, I would ask him. Yeah, but other than that, I would pick my favorite presidents. I'd pick, Harry Truman, John Adams, Teddy Roosevelt, just to
Teddy Roosevelt would be fascinating. I think
he is a fascinating guy.
Yeah. Just what because of his bravado and his attitude that we know about the moose.
And
how that would erupt.
Well, and combined with his brilliance, he was a brilliant guy, and which is often overlooked amidst all the other stuff that he's got going on. But I mean, he wrote a book about the Naval War of 1812, and the U.S. Navy bought a copy for every ship in the fleet. Like, he was that good at just whatever he set his mind to. He achieved a great deal, and a lot of it gets lost in San Juan Hill and some of the bull moose and all this other stuff. But he was a smart guy. He thought deeply. He was very moral. He believed in right and wrong like crazy. And so he's one of my all-time favorites, because the other ones, and I hate to say this, but a lot of our presidents who are revered did more outside of the presidency than they did in it. Like George Washington as president was not nearly as impressive as George Washington, the general of the Revolutionary Army.
Right.
Ulysses S. Grant, who always shows up in the top 20, was a horrible president. He had no talent for it at all. And so Teddy Roosevelt was one of the few presidents who was good in and out of the office. Like, he never dropped below a certain line of excellence.
Well, how much of that do you think is the actual president and the cult of personality? Because I mean, Teddy Roosevelt's a great example. It's like you can take everything that he did in office and put that to the side and just take the character of Teddy Roosevelt, and a lot of people would go, yeah, he was the greatest president because the mustache and the carry a big stick and all of that. Nothing to do with the actual things that he achieved.
Right.
It's about the man. It's about
so like some of our best presidents have been the most inexperienced. Right. Abe Lincoln served one term in Congress, and that was it. Harry Truman was a senator. He was vice president for 7 minutes, and then he was president. And it almost feels like the guys who never wanted the job are the best at it. Yeah. And the guys who are the least prepared for it are really good, because our most qualified presidents have been duds.
We had talked about that on the last time you were on, because we talked about how it should be the luck of the draw almost.
For Congress. Yeah. I mean,
president might be a little much. Like, we could have ended up with Sarah
much
Palin.
to pull out of a hat. But but if you come to the office with a certain amount of reverence, a certain amount of a sense that everything in your life has gone correctly to get you here, it gives you a sense of purpose. And I think Teddy Roosevelt had that, because if you look at the chain of events that got him to the White House, he really should never have gotten there. The only reason he ended up as president was a bullet. If McKinley had survived, Teddy probably wouldn't have been president.
You could say the same thing about Johnson, though, too, though.
Yeah.
Yep. So we have the Voting Act. We have all of the things that he was able to get through Congress, but he could have done that. He could have done that as Senate Majority Leader. Like, he didn't. If he had a compliant Democratic president and he was Senate Majority Leader, he would have told the president, you just sit over there, and I'm gonna bring you some stuff to sign, and you just sign it, and he would have taken care of the rest. So Johnson was going to get this stuff done, but in Johnson's case, being president imbued him with that sense of responsibility that he had to get this done. And so he did. Without that, who knows? Yeah.
The office does something to you.
Well, what do you think about the statement, I don't respect the man, I respect the office? You've heard that before, right?
I've heard it before. I feel like you have to respect the office. So what I used to say about presidents I didn't like was, this guy's sitting in George Washington's chair and he's sitting at Lincoln's desk, and let's at least start with the benefit of the doubt. He's inherited all of this gravitas and all of this legend. Let's see what he does with it, right? There were a lot of leaders in world history who got better in the office, right? So, like, you could say that about Lyndon Johnson, because I don't know what he was like before he became president, but he was a bit of a douchebag all the way through. But once he became president, he got the gravity of the office, and he realized what he could do with it. Same way that Teddy Roosevelt did. They saw the presidency as having a purpose for changing the world, which is really what it can do in the right hands. In the wrong hands, it feels like a waste. I don't think we've ever had a president where we're just like, he did all right. You know, we have strong feelings about them because we expect things from the president of the United States.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty high expectation, or it should be.
Well, even Biden, like even those people who say that Biden is a placeholder.
We say that.
I do believe that. Have you heard the new theory that Buttigieg and Harris are going to run on the same ticket? What do you think? Yeah. What do you think?
Well, I was telling my wife over the weekend that Mayor Pete would probably be a decent president because he's got some background and he's run a local government, which is the nuts and bolts of running a government are at the local level. Being in Congress for 50 years doesn't really prepare you for governing as an executive.
Yeah.
And I feel like Mayor Pete has had both sides of that now, having been in the cabinet, having been a mayor of a decent sized town. He's been in the Army, which would help him get elected, but not much else. Being in the military isn't really as big a preparation for the presidency as you might think. Some of our worst presidents have been generals. So that should tell you something. And it seems like Pete's heart is in the right place, which is another, to me, an essential characteristic.
What place do you think his heart's in?
I feel like, and this is from reading his statements, right? I don't, I've never watched any long form interviews of him. I can't really pronounce his last name, so it's a hurdle. But, he's made some statements about late term abortions, for example, that give me a sense that if you catch him by surprise, like if you interviewed him and dropped some bombs on him, some hard questions, I feel like his answers would come from a decent place. So, but I haven't studied him at all.
There's a documentary on him I've been toying with watching, and I've heard good, I've heard bad, but I don't know. I sometimes I just want to chalk him up in that same column as we had talked, like Hillary. It's like if I and Biden too, it's like if I follow a certain path, if I do a certain thing, I will get what I want because it's owed to me.
Yeah. Although his path hasn't been typical, right? You normally don't go from mayor of South Bend, Indiana to the White House.
Or so that's one-term senator from Illinois to...
No, that actually happens.
Okay. Damn, I thought I had one on you.
I've got an example. More than one, actually. But I don't know if he is looking at it like the ancient Romans looked at the cursus honorum. First I become quaestor, and then I become praetor, and then I become consul. I don't think I don't get a sense that he's seeing it as a ladder. So I'm not feeling that he has a sense of entitlement the way that Hillary Clinton surely did, and the way that Joe Biden did, and the way that Bob Dole, who just passed away, did. Yeah. I don't like a president who expected to get the job just because historically they don't do as well as the people who are kind of shoved into it.
That's a good point. But what about Harris? And knowing that this is a candidate who didn't win a single primary.
Well, and this is what I said to you last time about Biden. How many times did they run for president and fail before we say, you know what, they probably shouldn't get the job? The American people are not often wrong when they pick their presidential leaders, because in some cases you're like, oh my God, that guy's only been a senator for 2 years, but okay, he did all right as president.
Yeah.
If they don't vote for you in primaries, if the party faithful, because zealots vote in primaries, right? It's the party faithful.
Yeah.
If you can't win your own primary, you probably should take a hard look at yourself.
You play to your base on the primaries, and then you move to the center in the general.
Well, we used to. I don't know if we do that anymore.
Oh, well, no. But yeah, that
you're supposed to.
That got thrown out the window.
Right. But, if you have a hard time winning primaries, at least after, by Super Tuesday, you're going to have a hard time. Yeah. So, like Clinton was an underdog before Super Tuesday. Obama was kind of neck and neck, and then he kind of took off. But Harris and Biden never really did. They didn't inspire people and I hate to say this because I love him to death, like Bernie Sanders, this plodding old septuagenarian guy, inspires people to get excited, get emotional, get angry. And nobody's starting a fist fight over Joe Biden.
Yeah, that's the inspiration. Like,
Yes,
that's such an important part of it, the statesman. And I think we talked about this last time, and you can go, Kennedy had that. I mean, my mom still talks about the Kennedy years and how much it excited her as a young woman. I mean, even Eisenhower, you could say, had it because he had the military background. He still had that kind of like revered general thing. But there's Nixon. Nixon didn't exactly instill, I want to line up Tricky Dick's my man. It didn't.
Yeah,
doesn't really roll off the tongue.
And keep in mind that as American history rolls on, as we move into the modern age, partisanship accounts for a lot of the reason why you vote for a guy, right? Mm-hmm. So by the time Nixon ran for president in 1968, he had a lot going for him. He had a lot of momentum from being Eisenhower's vice president, from losing by a hair to JFK. Mm-hmm. It was almost an underdog story. And he ranks in the top 5 of presidents for foreign policy accomplishments.
China.
And the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And Vietnam. I mean, he was considered a foreign policy expert long before he got elected. And at the time, 1968, we're in the Cold War. We're worried about, the Soviet Union and communist China ganging up on us. Richard Nixon seems like the guy you send to take up for you.
But that doesn't play as much today, though, because back in the day, if he was a foreign policy expert in the 60s and 70s, the average person could barely find China on a map at that point, and now it's somebody says, well, I'm a foreign policy person. You are going to get dissected in a way that has never been done before. So, I mentioned Sarah Palin earlier. I know all about Russia. Yeah, because you can see it from my front porch. It's those days of just claiming it are gone.
Well, and here's why. The trick is to not claim it, because it wasn't Nixon saying I'm the guy. It was other people saying, Nixon's got some hefty foreign policy jobs. And, so kind of like George McClellan before the Civil War, everybody said he was a military expert, having never been in a battle almost, except for one. And by the time he showed up, he was a foreign policy expert. It's like I said about George W. Bush. He said, I'm a wartime president. Well, yeah, you started a war. So, and it's interesting. Well, but it's interesting to me what presidents can claim as a credential, even though there's nothing backing it up.
Okay, so let's tear that apart then. So Trump claimed that he was an incredible businessman who knew business inside and out, and he would turn the gears of government so we'd all be richer than our craziest dreams. Richard, what do you say? You're going to be so rich that you're not going to like it. He had some kind of bizarre statement he said once. You remember that? Yeah. He's like, you're going to get sick of winning. I think
you're going to get sick of winning, right? Yeah, because that's what we do.
So that's what he touted. Obama touted community organizer. He can get people to sit down at the table. That was kind of his thing. George W. What did he tout?
Compassionate conservatism.
Compassionate conservatism. I still don't even know what that means, because that's not what he was.
No.
So you have that.
First term George W. Bush and second term George W. Bush were two different people. So that's kind of important.
That's very true.
Yes. So
George W. Cheney.
Right. So, I almost like George W. Bush better second term than first term, when there comes a point in your tenure in the White House where you figure out that you're the president of the United States, and it hits every president we've had. It hits them at different points in their terms. Mm-hmm. George Washington, day one, right? Because there was nobody else. But John Adams stumbled for quite a while because he was in the shadow of Washington. But Jefferson, he moved right in. Wheels are already turning. And so if you look at historically, like even Obama and Jimmy Carter, it always seems to be the Democrats who stumble early. Jimmy Carter, Barack Obama, Bill Clinton, took them a while to get their feet under them. And George W. Bush was being told what to do by a bunch of old men who worked for his daddy. And I think in the beginning, he didn't really gather all the Thor's hammer of power to himself and say, you know what, I get to decide this stuff.
Yeah, the rumor
Not you
was
guys.
he would rather have been playing baseball. He would have rather have been
Right.
owning a major league team. Why do you think that is, though? Why do you think the Democrats have such a difficult time getting their footing under them right away?
I think because Democrats tend to be more ideological, and when they hit the wall of practical governing, it knocks them back on their heels for a little bit.
So they just go back on the planks in their platform?
Yeah, well, I think they lose sight of their goal, and I think that if they're not clear in their power base, like where their power actually comes from,
yeah,
that's when they stumble. So if you go back to Teddy Roosevelt knew from day one that any power that he had politically came from the masses of American people who would shout his name and do whatever he said. Mm-hmm. Which you may remember that happened recently in our history as well. Right? And so Teddy always knew that if he ever ran into any kind of serious opposition, he was going to get on a train, he was going to travel around the country, and he was going to rant at people until they agreed with him. And then he would tell them, tell your congressman to do what I want. And again, all politicians are cowards, right? And so if you're out in their district telling their people that you're no good, you're going to lose your next election.
Yeah.
And you don't want, that's why they called it the bully pulpit when Teddy Roosevelt was in office. That's what he used it for. And so you look at Jimmy Carter, you look at Bill Clinton, you look at Barack Obama, I'm not sure they were clear on where their power to get things done actually came from. And it took them a while to figure it out. So one of the essential things you have to know when you walk in the front door of the White House is either you have to understand how you're going to get things done and where your power comes from, or you better fake it really, really good like Ronald Reagan.
And that power can come from different places, though, because we're looking at it with Biden now. As he came in, he's like, we're gonna get rid of student debt. We're gonna get the vaccine out. We're gonna end the pandemic. We're gonna save the wolves. He even came out and said he was gonna save the wolves, and he's on almost all of those. He's backpedaled and said, "Oh, well, yeah, well, that's not what I meant." But what he really means is he doesn't have the power to actually make those things happen. So does that make those lies, or does that make him misjudging the overreaching?
Overreaching, yes, but this is the inspiration factor, right? Because Kennedy says in 10 years we're going to put a man on the moon, right? Mm-hmm. And at the time he didn't know how much it would cost, he didn't know how it was going to get done, but his ability to inspire people was at such a high level that he got people thinking about, well, we're going to be on the moon in 10 years, so we better figure it out.
Yeah.
When Joe Biden says we're going to eradicate student debt, nobody's going, well, how do we do that? And all the people who have a vested interest in student debt staying where it is are not on his side.
That's not an inspiring thing, though. No, I don't think it is, because I paid off all my student debt. Right. So what about all the people that did that? Well, that didn't help me.
Well, you have to pick the right issue. You have to, like the polls, I was looking at some of them before the show, was, what makes for a great president? And there's a number of criteria. One of them is luck, but of course, but there's, ability to get along with Congress, there's inspiration, communication, domestic accomplishment, foreign policy, and all these kinds of things, right? And so our most inspirational presidents have not always been successful at getting things done, right? You can talk a good game, but then you have to deliver, which is where Obama stumbled, and where even Reagan, who was very inspiring, he just couldn't get stuff done, I think mainly because he didn't know how.
But can you be Reagan's interesting, because Reagan, in retrospect, you look back at some of the things that Reagan did, and there are a lot of things. I'm not even talking Iran-Contra. I'm talking the handling of the AIDS crisis, emptying the asylums. There's all of these things that he did that aren't very inspiring when you look back in retrospect.
No.
But he had this ability to. There was an odd renaissance in the 80s as far as American pride. And it's a lot different, though, than this, I'm going to call it a pseudo renaissance that happened under Trump, because that was America first. That was, F every other country. We got to take care of ourselves. We don't care who it hurts. And Reagan was more of a kind of a Rambo kind of like, let's made in America proud.
Yes.
Shining city on a hill, which is taken out of context.
So
that's different.
Well, right. But, and think about it. You have to think about these things in historical context, because Reagan came essentially after Nixon, right? The Republican Party took a huge hit with Nixon. Mm-hmm. Gerald Ford didn't pull them out of it. Mm-hmm. And Jimmy Carter proved why the alternative to a Republican isn't always a surefire winner.
Anybody but a Republican. Basically, he's Biden for the 70s.
Right. He was Biden for the 70s. And so Reagan came out with strong conservative ideology. And he said, you know what? I'm not going to be ashamed of being a Republican or a conservative. I'm not going to be ashamed of patriotism. And when I'm a Republican president, I don't want to hear about Nixon, even if I do things that are Nixonian, because I'm not apologizing for the past. He's, city on a hill is about the future. And the reason that presidents are inspirational is because they make you feel good about being an American. Mm-hmm. And in different time periods, that means different things. In the 80s, it was sticking it to the Soviet Union, right? In 2017, it was sticking it to the libs. And so whatever it is that makes you feel good about being an American, the president who can capture that the best and sustain it for the longest is going to score pretty high on inspiration.
And you just touched on a terrifying thought when you think about it. So in the past, you have to have a boogeyman. You have to have a villain. You have to have an antagonist. So Soviet Union, the libs. Well, wait a second. What is it now? What is it with Trump? What is it with Biden? Some people are saying, it's China. Okay, well, if this is our enemy, we're trying to trade with them, then we're trying to deal with all these things. Isn't it? It's the enemy is becoming other Americans. The enemy is becoming your neighbor. It's becoming the person who can't agree with you. They must be part of the problem, and they're destroying this country.
Right. And the problem with that is that nobody is accurately assessing the mood of the country. So like Donald Trump was able to capture it when he said most Americans are paying, they're paying 20% of their paycheck in taxes. They're not seeing a lot for it. Jobs are disappearing or getting worse. They're working harder for less. Not wrong about any of that. Mm-hmm. And you feel like your government isn't doing anything. And he was the guy who was going to go and kick over the anthill and get that done. It was an astounding historical moment that he typically squandered because he's not a visionary, and he only captures a mood the way that a seducer does, right? And you'll edit this out, but when a seducer meets a young girl with daddy issues, he capitalizes on that for that moment, right? But he's not the guy who marries a woman who has had a bad life and is damaged and sustains her for the rest of her life. It's a different thing. And so when Donald Trump says, you're disaffected, you're downtrodden, he parlayed that into an electoral victory and then didn't do the things you do to solve that problem that he himself pointed out.
Oh my God, the United States has daddy issues. That's really what it comes down to.
Is that the tagline for our show now?
That's the tagline right there.
So I feel like the next movement, and this is the question I think I asked you in our earlier episode, is how does this end? To a reasonable center American, how do you see this playing out? Because right now we're not on a trajectory that ends anywhere good. We're in the 3rd century of the fall of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So I feel like our next inspirational leader has to start with, you know what? Enough already. We're not accomplishing anything. We're not living up to the ideals of the American Republic. We are not the shining example of the world that we set out to be. We have spent our history correcting our own mistakes, slavery, right? Oppression. We're even now starting to head in the direction dealing with all the evil things we did to Native Americans.
Mm-hmm.
We are self-correcting. We improve over time, and we've stopped doing that. And Congress is now so dysfunctional that they can't get anything done. And so even if you're just a taxpayer, do you like giving away all this money for it to go nowhere and accomplish nothing? You're not helping anyone. You're not really doing anything. America's not moving forward, I think, is the next inspirational leader has to say, we are not moving forward.
But what if the daddy issues are too ingrained? What if, and I'm not making light of it, but
no.
if you talk, let's use your example, because I think it's perfect, is if some guy is at a bar and he's talking to a woman with daddy issues, and he literally is a nice guy, and he sits there and he starts treating her the way that she should want to be treated, or the way that most women would expect to be treated, a lot of times they're going to push back because they don't think they deserve that, or there's some deeper issue. So is the United States that girl at the bar who is going to go hit on the guy at the end with the drinking problem and the drug problem,
yes,
and might, put her on the back of his Harley because that's what she believes she could.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So we're going to extend this metaphor, right? Because it's working for us so far.
Okay.
The payoff in sustaining another person who has issues, a baggage of any kind, you probably don't realize it until 5 years later, when you look back and say, oh, I did the right thing at the right time, and I held to my morals.
Mm-hmm.
I kept doing the right thing over and over again. And now I'm married to the girl with daddy issues, and she loves me to death, and she's going to be holding my hand when I die. If you're just trying to exploit the issues to get what you want, you're done. You're done in a week. You're done in a month, right? Mm-hmm. But if you do the right thing, and you consistently do the right thing, and you prove that you're the guy who always does the right thing, like Teddy Roosevelt, you'll get the girl and keep her.
But can you, if we're going back to the bar, if the election is that bar, that tavern, that nightclub, right? You only got so much time in that club before they move on to someone else. So does somebody have enough time to convince them they're a good person?
Well, let me put it to you this way. Democrats don't, but Republicans do. Okay? Because Republicans can get a point across in 3 seconds. Democrats want to write a position paper.
Oh, they want to write true.
Right. They want to tell you about their 15-point plan to do their 12-point thing, to do their 5 steps to get us to the thing. Yeah. And you're not listening anymore. Build the wall. Well, that's easy. Right?
Yeah.
Free college for everybody. Let's go back to Huey Long. Or even Herbert Hoover, a chicken in every pot and a car in every driveway, right? These are simple things. City on a hill, America first, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I hate to say it this way, but if you're trying to seduce the girl, you don't have an hour, right? You have 5 seconds, you have 10 seconds, you have a minute.
Well, I did the dating show. They know within 5 seconds whether they're gonna sleep with you, let alone go home with you.
Right.
Exactly, just by looking at your shoes.
Yes, or where you might be in the produce section. So consider that we need an inspirational leader who can get the message across fast enough and then do the work.
But Bill Clinton kind of did that, because he did Carville.
He did.
And he had the whole idea of kitchen table economics. And that resonated because a person knows that. That's a bite. That's a sound bite. They get that.
Well, and here's the thing, is that you have to be able to say things that the most number of people can agree on without thinking about it, right? So Donald Trump is an expert at this kind of thing. Immigration is bad. Well, you kind of have to agree with that. The way that it's currently playing out, it's not good, but it's a complex subject. So you're going to need somebody to manage that in order to get success. But to win an election, immigration is bad.
Mm-hmm.
So let's pick things that everyone in America can agree on. All right, let's try this. I'll do a couple and then you do a couple.
Okay.
The national debt is too high.
True. Medical care is broken.
Healthcare sucks is how
Yes.
you want to put that, right? If you're
Healthcare
running for
sucks.
office, healthcare sucks, right? Congress is dysfunctional.
Hmm.
Partisanship is destroying the country.
Infrastructure has broken down.
But that now you're buying her weak drinks because infrastructure means different things to different people.
We need to fix the roads.
Yeah.
Is that better?
Well, for a guy who has a podcast called The Open Highway, I can see why the roads are near and dear to your heart, but you have to express it in terms that are meaningful to people, right?
Yeah.
And
the widest portion of people possible is what we're saying.
Well, what do roads do, right? This is the thing that I expect you've given some thought to, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was just reading an example of this the other day. Canal boats in the UK. Okay. In the 1700s, the Industrial Revolution was kicking off with a bang, full steam ahead, you might say, but they had no way to get raw materials to London where the factories were, and they had no way to get the goods back out to where the people could buy them because there were no roads, there were no trains. So they dug canals, 4,000 miles of canals through the UK, because that's what they had to do to get things to market. We take roads for granted because they're right there on the ground.
Yeah.
But it's how we move everything. It matters a great deal. It's how people from one place in this country get to another. It is the undiscovered country. And so they have to be good and they have to work. Mm-hmm. And that's why we need infrastructure. But again, if it takes that long to explain it, you're going to lose them. And
it's
roads,
not sexy.
Roads are not sexy.
Yeah.
Right. Journeys are sexy, but roads are not. So if you could restrict your stump speech to the things that the most number of people could agree on, you'll win people over. Because when we watch the news or we listen to what's going on out there, we get on social media, we are only seeing the fringes of each side. The people who have no shame and no compunction about saying whatever they feel like whenever they want.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like that's maybe 30%. The rest of us are just looking for things that make sense to us and say, well, if we can't agree on whether infrastructure is a bridge or childcare, then let's tackle the national debt because I can do math, right?
Right.
Let's tackle healthcare because I've been sick and I'm likely to be sick again, and I don't want to go bankrupt over it. Let's talk about that.
But what about, okay, so Trump is an interesting example because he pointed, let's talk about him in the past tense because that's hopeful that it's continuing to be past tense, but I think we all know it's not going to be. No. He would point out something like immigration. And it's interesting the way you said it, because you said immigration is bad. It's not that immigration is bad, it's the immigration system is bad. But Trump would have absolutely said immigration is bad and the rapists from Mexico and all of that things. So let's agree that that Trump came out and he said, here's a problem. Boom, immigration's a problem. But then he gets into office and the people that he picks to help solve the immigration problem don't have the experience or they don't really care about the problem. I saw an article the other day, or it was actually a meme. It was about his son and daughter, or son-in-law, one of the brood, and about how they got put in charge of the Middle East peace process and they didn't do a damn thing. But they each made like billions of dollars from the business contacts that they were able to do. And this is an example of, okay, well, I can come up and say, I am going to solve this issue. This is an issue that we need to fix. But if the follow through isn't there by the people that you choose, then it's just as bad as Biden getting up and saying, "Oh yeah, well I can't deal with student debt." Right. You know, if hiring people, surrounding yourselves with incompetent individuals is just as bad as lying about your platform.
Right. Well, and so two things. That's an expression of modern partisanship, right? Because if I give your campaign $4 million, you're going to make me secretary of something,
or an ambassador or something,
or an ambassador, or undersecretary of something.
Yeah.
And so historically, the Democrats tend to look for people who are qualified in their field, and Republicans look for, generally speaking, not that. There have been exceptions.
Cronies, say it. Cronies.
Well, cronies. But when you look at people like Donald Rumsfeld and Dick Cheney, these were guys who knew what they were doing. You didn't like them, but they knew what they were doing. They had the wealth of experience. And there comes a line where the wealth of experience morphs into a concrete unwillingness to accept new information. So I think that's what happened to Rumsfeld and Cheney. But Donald Trump came up with Build the Wall at a campaign rally, and they loved it so much that it became policy.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't care. It wasn't his idea, and there was no 12-point program behind it to fix it. It sounded good. It got people cheering. It wins elections. And if that's all you care about, you stop. Now, to get us back to Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt is one of the biggest egomaniacs in American history. When he wrote his autobiography, the publisher had to order new eyes for the type because he used so many of them that they ran out. When he was in Cuba, in San Juan Hill, he brought newspapermen, he brought the early motion picture cameras with him to document him doing his thing to get attention, right? But he also charged up San Juan Hill and people were shooting at him, and he led the charge. Yeah. And so you can be an egomaniac as long as you deliver. And no matter how egotistical Teddy Roosevelt ever was, most of the people who supported him never had any doubt that he was doing the best he could for the country. Mm-hmm. And if you pull that off, you could be an egomaniac. And this is where some of history's greatest egomaniacs have floundered, like Douglas MacArthur, who was good at what he did, right? But he was so much of an egomaniac that at the end of the day, you're like, no, this is really all about you, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's the feeling we get about Donald Trump. At the end of the day, no matter what it is, somehow it's always just about you and what you want. And that ends, your vision is over.
Do you think he wanted to win? Do you really think he wanted to win? Or do you think he was, like they say, that he was actually surprised by it? And
I think he was surprised. I think he was surprised because he was a long shot. So there's that to begin with. I feel like if you're looking at it from purely a profit motive, he would have made more money if he had ran and lost than if he had ran and won.
Oh, yeah.
I think that the smart people around him, both of them, were telling him that the level of scrutiny that you're going to get as president is unlike anything you've ever seen. You will not be able to control the narrative the way you could when you were in business and you were on TV and you were on Howard Stern, where you could write your own press and then have it be true. This is going to be a different thing. And he wasn't prepared for it.
He also came up in a time when he played his own. There's that story where he actually called up somebody as his own PR agent and used a fake name. And you can't do that anymore.
Right. And how different is that, though, from Teddy Roosevelt making sure that when he was police commissioner in New York, he would go on these nighttime inspection tours to catch the cops napping or drinking or whatever. Yeah. But he always took a reporter with him.
That's everybody. That's nothing. Everybody's done that. Not everybody, sure. Not you and I, but I mean, that's such a common.
It's self-promotion. It's self-promotion. And so self-promotion in 1897 versus self-promotion in 2015, it looks different. Like, Donald Trump's smartest thing he ever did as a candidate was he would call all the morning shows.
Oh God. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm watching Hillary Clinton and everybody running against him. Like, you don't think that if you called Morning Joe, they'd take your call? Why aren't you doing that?
Well, they argued, I remember that argument because he would go on Fox and then because legally they had to give equal time to Hillary. And she's like, well, I don't want to go on that. I don't want to go on that network. And it's like, that is so dumb.
It is so dumb because if you are good at what you do, you can go anywhere and take any question anytime.
Yeah.
And if you're not, you can't. Now, or you can make stuff up. But to be when Bill Clinton was running in the primaries in 92, he was up against Paul Tsongas, who was more experienced, way smarter. Well, maybe not way smarter, but Bill Clinton was the guy who would walk into the studio and go, "Where's my guy? I'm ready to go." And Paul Tsongas was like, "Well, what kind of questions are you going to ask me?" Yeah. Oh. If you're going to be president of the United States, they do the prime minister's questions in the UK. I'd love to have that.
Oh, can you imagine that?
I would love to have that.
You could sell tickets.
Right, because what it does is it would educate the American people that your president has to know things intrinsically, organically. There has to be a wealth of knowledge that you just have to have. And you have to be quick on your feet, and you have to be able to answer questions.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to, the clearest test of believing someone as to whether they're sincere or not is if they keep telling the same story over and over again.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when you put the UK prime minister on the spot and he says, yes, I love coal. Coal is how we built the empire. Screw you. We're keeping coal. You're like, well, okay, he's a fan of coal. And we don't, even as purportedly hostile as the press is in America, we don't put their feet to the fire the way that they should, because they're not asking them the questions that most of us want the answer to, like, why does healthcare suck? And what's your idea to fix it?
Yeah. Have you seen the White House press briefings lately? They sang happy birthday.
Yeah.
The other day. I miss Helen Thomas.
Yeah, I don't. Hero worship has no place in a newsroom.
It's gotten so bad. Have you heard there's a new book coming out? It's not Bob Woodward. It's someone else, but it's detailing some of the handover with Trump. And it talks about part of the reason, according to this book, is that they were not expecting to win. And that's why they never prepped the shadow government. They never prepped the changeover. So when he won, they were months behind in the transfer of power. So that's what the book argues.
The last time I read any kind of in-depth anything about an election, it was probably 92. But if you've got the right campaign people running your campaign, they start transition as soon as they can, whether win or lose. I feel a sense of hesitancy about Biden, and this kind of just confirms it, that, you want the guy who's going to kick the White House door open and walk right in.
Mm-hmm.
And, like that story about why they fired the chief usher at the White House because he wouldn't open the door when the Biden showed up.
I heard that story. I did hear that story.
Right. You know what? Teddy Roosevelt would have kicked the door open and walked right in and said, my desk is over here. I need you all to get out of my way.
What did Teddy? What were his numbers? When he won the electoral
1904?
College? Yeah. Or ballpark?
They were pretty good. It was seen as a landslide.
So he was seen as a unifier. He was seen as president of the country, not just his percentage. So I mean, even if he always seemed to me as like, even if you didn't like him, you kind of loved to hate him. It's like, how could you not resist his charisma?
Well, and again, he made you feel good about being an American. So when he was president, there was an incident, a diplomatic incident, where an American was kidnapped essentially for ransom. And he sent the fleet, I think it was Spain or somewhere in that area.
Mm-hmm.
He sent battleships, and he sent a message that said, we want him alive. And so you are to deliver him alive, or we will blow you up. And America was like, yes, that's how we're supposed to do things.
But
like
you
when
couldn't
Reagan
do that nowadays because of the media. Because it would get round the world parsed, digitized, social media.
But that's not my problem. If I'm the president of the United States, hold on. If I'm the president of the United States, it is important that the American people see you try, even if you fail, if you're sincere about it. Mm-hmm. And so the reason it wouldn't work is because nobody would try it. And that's not a reason to fail. Like I said, you want a president who's going to kick the door down. You want a president who's going to look at an international situation and go, you know what? What if we didn't do it this way anymore? Which is what Trump said he would do. But then he kind of just didn't, because he didn't know enough about foreign policy to really shake things up. Yeah. But, you want a president like the evacuation from Afghanistan. So I have my own theories about this. Again, this is why we edit. But the one thing that the Taliban did not want was for us to stay there, right?
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't do anything until we were gone. And so they were counting down until we left. If you're trying to get your people out and you're trying to get your allies out, you say to the Taliban, I need you to open the roads to the airport, and I need you to back far enough away so that when I send guys in to blow up your checkpoints, you don't get hurt. If you don't do that, I'm going to send 1 million guys back into your country and we're going to take it over. The roads to the airport would have been open.
Yeah.
You have to know foreign policy is about self-interest, and you have to know what they want and you have to know what they're afraid of. And the only thing the Taliban was afraid of was us staying there. So that's what you have to threaten them with in order to get what you want.
So what did you think how do you think it was handled badly? Like, do you believe that it was handled badly, or do you think that Biden should have been more strong-armed?
I think he should have been stronger up front, because there is the what happens, right? In international affairs, there's the what happens, and then there's how you look doing it. And so at the end, evacuating the number of people we did and the amount of time that we did was a phenomenal Berlin airlift kind of achievement.
Right.
But because you blew it earlier on, it doesn't matter what you do later to fix it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it would require, to me, some consistency. And what you want in a president is somebody who says, you know what, you're not going to push us around.
But he was claiming that his hands were tied. He claimed that Trump had signed a deal and then he pushed that deal. And then he said, no, I had to do it by this date or more lives would have been lost.
Have you ever watched The West Wing?
Yeah.
Okay. A great scene in The West Wing where the president says, look down at the floor where the carpet with the seal of the President of the United States is. Mm-hmm. And then he says, now look up at me. And let me tell you what we're going to do next. For Joe Biden or any president to say my hands are tied, then you have the wrong job, sir. Your job is to untie your hands. And if you can't figure out how to do that, you're not the right guy for the job.
But he's got 3.5 more years at that point. He's not going to quit. That's another thing that bothers me too, is I'm waiting for that, because now we have that is like, if a senator, it used to just be like, oh, well, the head of this company did this, they need to quit. And then it became, oh, this senator, this governor, this representative, they did this, they need to quit. I'm waiting for a time when we start hearing that. We hear it from Republican talking heads, but you don't really hear it from the left. But I'm waiting for a time where that's the go-to, where we start hearing, oh, well, the president screwed up, he needs to leave office. With a seriousness, though.
No, it'll never come to that. I believe it'll never come to that, because we're trying to avoid parliamentary rule in this country, right? It's why third parties never take off. So in a parliamentary democracy, when your prime minister screws up, you can get rid of him and get somebody else, right? There's not so much a single rallying figure as there is a amorphous group of dudes, who get things done. We don't like that here, and the thing is, we've built the American presidency in such a way that it's almost a sacred thing. And if you think about even Donald Trump's tenure, he got a lot of respect that maybe he didn't earn, because we revere the office. And so again, I always think about, if someone said that Teddy Roosevelt should resign, you know what he'd say? He'd say, meet me out back. That's what we want. That's what we want in a president.
Yeah.
And we want a president like Kennedy after Bay of Pigs, right? Went on national television, said this was my fault, even though it wasn't. Of all the people who could say the previous administration tied my hands, Kennedy in the Bay of Pigs could have said that plausibly, and he chose not to. So it's just a different way of doing things.
That's the buck stops here. I mean, that wasn't Kennedy, that was Truman. Yeah.
Right. But there's a reason the buck stops there. And until you believe it, you're not going to be effective as president. And I'm not sure that, well, Trump never had that sign on his desk because he was always blaming somebody else for whatever went wrong.
Oh, yeah.
But I feel like even in the Biden administration, the buck stops here sign is still in the basement, and they need to bring it upstairs, put it on his desk, and turn it so he can see it.
It just, that the administration feels so, I don't even know the term to use, half-baked, half filled, it's just, maybe I was thinking about this the other day. Maybe it's not so much that we don't feel that, maybe it's not that we don't think that something's going on there, that the policies are being made, things are moving forward. It's not so much that it's not happening. It's just we are so used to, after 4 years of Trump, having it just be permeated into every part of our lives. Like, it wasn't just the evening news or podcasts or the news. Everywhere we went, it was like 24/7. He was in our lives and speaking, and we were hearing him. Maybe we're going through like a withdrawal.
And maybe we are, but I'll tell you this, FDR, right? Since I'm in a Roosevelt theme, when he did his fireside chats, they were astoundingly effective because he would focus on one topic basically, and they were short, and they received such popular acclaim that his advisors said, you know what, you should do one of these a week. And he said, nope, because the more the president talks, the more likely it is that he becomes background noise. And when I have something to say to the American people, I want them to be listening. And
That's true.
So what you have is you have Trump, who couldn't shut up, and you have Biden, who I'm not sure has found a coherent message. If you look at every presidential administration worth its salt, there were one or two unifying concepts of the administration. There were things that they just kept coming back to. If Bernie Sanders was president, he wouldn't let a day go by without talking about free college, because that's his thing, right? Like the Cato the Elder, who finished every speech in the forum by saying Carthage must be destroyed, no matter what the topic was. And so Biden needs to find his issue or set of issues. And the one that, if I got to pick for him, the issue would be strength through unity, because our disunity is Christmas to our enemies and our friends, by the way.
Yeah.
The people in the world who would see us fail could not be happier about our dysfunction.
Yeah. I just talked to J. Scott Christensen about that. He's an expert at algorithms and AI, and we had a whole discussion about that disunity, how it's being sowed. And even the Russia, the last elect, the idea that the Russians helped swing the election toward Trump, and he brought it up. He's like, they didn't do that. All they did was sow discord, and that's all it took. Right. And there's this video out there, I need to find it and post it, of a former Russian Soviet. He wasn't a spy master, but he was like a strategist. And he basically in the 80s laid out exactly what's happening right now. And he's like, this is how you conquer a country. You just turn them against each other. You make them, look at their government and not trust it and not believe that they're out for their best interests. He's like, that's exactly how the fall of America will happen.
Well, and here's another history example for you.
Bring it.
In the early, let's say 4th century Roman Empire, Christianity was a problem because they couldn't figure out, they were supplanting the old gods. They were a threat to the civic authority. And Constantine, the emperor, said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to make it legal. We're going to let people be Christians. And they're like, oh my God, you're crazy. Why would you do that? He said, because they'll destroy each other for us. Let them out. Let them say whatever they want. Let them practice however they want. And before long, they will turn on each other and they will destroy themselves. And he wasn't wrong, because all the competing sects of Christianity within 50 years had disappeared, and we had Catholicism.
Right.
And so even if you look at 9/11, 9/11 wasn't about a body count, right? They weren't going to defeat us. They were going to sow discord. They were going to throw an apple into our midst and make us fight over it. And that's where they succeeded. And so they know that if they can turn us against each other, they will win. But what it means by default is that if we unite against them, they will absolutely lose. And that's the big secret they don't want us all to figure out at the same time.
So you think if Biden took on the unity message and that was his, if he put all his energy into that.
Yes.
Or at least visually, at least publicly.
Right. And the way that you have to do that is you have to say, like some of our greatest presidents have, we're not going to worry about that right now. Because all of our best presidents, Washington, Lincoln, FDR, right? Top 3 every time, no matter how you slice it. The one mainstay of their administration that keeps them in the top 3 is they said, we're not going to worry about that right now, right? Washington, it was slavery. Lincoln, it was everything but the Civil War and keeping the Union together. And with FDR, it was the Great Depression. And oh, look, a world war. So we're not going to worry about all this other stuff right now. And that's how they were able to counteract partisanship by saying, you know what? The national debt's too high. We're going to focus on that.
But you can't do that now. You can't do that now. You think so?
Again, much like sending the fleet to Spain, nobody's really tried. And until they do, I would be skeptical. Because remember, there's a willing audience out here. It's not just disaffected rednecks who are upset. It's everybody.
Right.
Because the national debt's too high, healthcare sucks, and 20 cents on every dollar I make goes to Washington for apparently no reason at all. So, and we don't the reason Trump lost is because we don't like this kind of thing going on. We don't like all this discord.
Yeah.
Opposition is healthy because through conflict, you can reach solutions, but this is discord for its own sake. And this seems like discord for profit, because when it comes to politics, if somebody is making a career out of it, if somebody is making money off of it, it's not good. And a lot of the people who are doing all the talking in the political sphere are building careers for themselves, and they're making book deals.
So if Biden came out, and instead of, personally, one of the things he's got to stop doing is he hasn't done it lately, but he used to do it all the time. Oh, they won't let me take questions. He would say that, you know that, and it's like, wow, we're talking about your mental state, and you're basically giving them ammunition when you say stuff like that. But if he came out and said unity, 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 and hopefully his speechwriters would put it in a better context than that.
Yes.
And then you go over to the House and you go over to the Senate, and Rand Paul or Munchin or any of these guys are suddenly beating that drum. That drum gets really loud, and then that drum gets picked up by the media, and that it gets echoed. So you're saying that if he was staunch enough, if he was strong enough on message, that eventually that drum beat would fade. You think that's what happened?
I think so, because you have to. So our successful presidents who successfully beat the other side, even though the deck was stacked against them. Mm-hmm. Harry Truman's presidential election, 1948, right? Mm-hmm. He was going to lose.
He did. He held up the paper.
Right. Until he got on a train and went out among the people and said, the Congress, which is run by Republicans, is doing nothing. We are squandering all the gains that we've made in the World War. And many of you out here have lost people, sons, husbands, brothers to the war. And everything that we won is being squandered by this Congress. And you know what you need to do? You need to vote for me in 1948. And he won. If you persist in your message, what I would say to Rand Paul, what I would say, my own congressman, Thomas Massey, who just put out a Christmas card with him and his whole family holding guns.
Oh, I saw that. I'm so sorry.
He ran unopposed last time. So there's the thing. But the simple message to them is, your brand of politics is no longer what we do here in America. It is bad for the country. And you stop. You don't say anything else. You let that sit, because people already think it's bad for the country. Mm-hmm. They don't think that Rand Paul standing up for 3 days having a filibuster to block some stupid amendment that he wants is good for the country. They don't think all this political infighting is good for the country. They don't think that Joe Manchin should be able to single-handedly hold up a bill that everybody in America wants. Mm-hmm. They know it's bad. What they want is they want the President of the United States to point at it over and over again and say, this is bad for the country. Do you remember when Jon Stewart went on Tucker Carlson?
Oh, when they had that big face-off?
Yeah, but it wasn't really a big face-off, because Jon Stewart didn't raise his voice. He didn't jump up and down and wave his arms. He says, what you are doing is bad for the country, and you need to stop if you love America. That's a simple message.
Yeah. And
I think that most people in the country would go, you know what? He's got a point. And when you're the President of the United States, you never go wrong picking on Congress.
But is Biden the one to do that? Does he have the ability? And I don't know if I have an answer for this, but does he have the ability? Because there is the argument of his mental state. There is the argument of why is he in there? What is important to him? Does he have the political power? Does he have all that it takes? If it was JFK and he walked up there and cracked that Massachusetts smile and with that little drawl and said, hey, we're all going to be friends. We're going to work this out. I think people will get behind it.
Sure.
But when Biden gets up there, and does he have the moxie? I'm going to use that one. Does he have the style?
Two things. The guy who's going to beat him is the guy who can do it. So let's start there.
Yeah.
So if he's not motivated, he needs to get motivated, because the person who captures the unity argument will win. So he's got to figure it out.
Yeah.
You're right about Kennedy, though, because we love the underdog. We love the guy who's just trying to do the right thing, and it feels like the whole world is assailed against him, right? Mm-hmm. And if Joe Biden went out there and said, this is the kind of politics that has been causing America to lose since Nixon, and we have to stop it, and we have to do it now. And I know you're with me, because you all think this. You know this is not right. I'm going to keep saying it until everybody gets it. Yeah. And you know what? If your representative, your congressman, if your senator is one of these guys who every time he opens his mouth, he's just throwing gasoline on a fire, you know what to do about that, right? Primary him, vote him out.
Right.
On principle, vote him out on principle. And while I have your attention, term limits for Congress.
Oh, God, please.
Right? Because, if you start with the premise that Congress is dysfunctional and that the business of politics has eclipsed the governing of the country, term limits for Congress is a pretty neat solution. In fact, if you want to drain a swamp, that's how you do it.
Mm-hmm. That's absolutely true. But what about
this is why my friends and relatives who love Trump so much, they're like, he drained the swamp. I'm like, no, he didn't.
No, he didn't.
But you know how I know? No congressional term limits.
Yeah.
Because that's the only way to do it.
But the lobbyists, none of that's changed.
Yeah.
I heard a really interesting. I don't know if you listened to the episode with Greg Crino.
Yes.
So remember what he said about, well, I like Trump, and most conservatives like Trump because he's a fighter. Every once in a while, he accidentally hits a baby.
Yes.
But we'll accept that. And
yes.
and it's just a bizarre. It's a bizarre way to look at it.
It's true because Teddy Roosevelt punched his share of babies too. But we want to see the president fighting because we believe that the president fights for us.
But what if he's only fighting for 51% of the nation?
Then that becomes obvious pretty quick.
Yeah.
And then you tune him out. Then he's not your guy. This is how 82 million people lined up to vote him out of office.
Yeah.
You're not our guy.
Well, it was anybody but Biden. I'm sorry, anybody but Trump.
Anybody but Trump. Right.
Or Hillary.
Yeah. But that's us. So like when Teddy Roosevelt lost in 1912, he sent a telegram to Woodrow Wilson saying, the American people have given you the greatest honor in their gift. Mm-hmm. And the 2020 election was a gift to Biden. But it's also a warning. It says, you won, but we kind of carried you over the threshold, buddy boy.
Yeah.
Don't screw it up and do something with it. Now that you have this gift, because this is what Roosevelt was saying to Woodrow Wilson. Now that you have it, make it mean something. Do good with it. Or you're wasting the American people's gift.
Do you think there's anybody out there right now on the political landscape who has the, you're not going to win me over on Biden. I don't think Biden's going to walk out one day and give some speech that's going to change the world.
No.
But do you think there's anybody out there with the potential to bring that to the office on the current landscape? Who?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know their name, but I will tell you that historically what we do is we find a governor from out in the hinterland who is untainted by Washington politics, and we bring him in. So if I was the governor of a square state somewhere out in your neck of the woods or nearby, I would seriously be considering a dark horse candidacy for president.
Do you think that there's a possibility of that in 24? Or do you think it's just going to be Trump versus Biden / Buttigieg / Harris?
Well,
do you think Trump? Wait. Do you think Trump's going to run again in 24?
Yeah, if he's alive, he'll run.
Even if he's not, you got to wonder.
Yeah, because I don't think, having been president, there's nowhere else to go. You can't sit it out. As, again, not to be tiresome, Teddy Roosevelt, 1908, sat out that election, regretted it for the rest of his life. Once you've been there, you can't give it up.
What about the Speaker of the House argument, though?
That's a trick.
You don't think they'd actually do that?
Well,
for those who, everybody should know this, but there's a strange rule that the Speaker of the House doesn't actually have to be a member of the House. They could vote Donald Duck in, and he would be the new Speaker of the House. So the argument is that they think that once they retain, if they can take the House, then they will vote in Donald Trump as Speaker. And
right. But then the follow-up to that is that then the idea is that you impeach Biden and Harris, which makes Trump president. That's a big hurdle, and it's bad for the country. I mean, it's bad. I mean, just economically, that's the kind of shenanigans that will lose, trillions of dollars in the stock market. Nobody wants it. Yeah. And so if we win in 2022, we're going to make Donald Trump Speaker of the House. We're going to start impeachment proceedings against the president and then the vice president. And then we're going to elevate the speaker to the White House. Most Americans are going to go, oh, no, we're not doing that.
That's a coup. It's a legal coup.
Yes. And it's not something that I think most people would go for. And, in the past, we've always counted on the Senate to be the adults in the room, right? Because the House, the House is a bunch of frat boys and girls, and they're partying hard over there. But the Senate is like, okay, let's everybody just calm down.
Yeah.
And as long as the Senate can maintain its adult in the room role, we have a valve. But as partisanship and time goes on, that's going to go away. And then all bets are off.
Why do you fill me with terror? You fill me with fear.
No, because now what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to use your vast platform of influence to encourage people to do simple things for the good of the country. Vote, even if you have to stand in the rain all day.
Yeah.
Go in person, bring your ID, and vote. Do it. And make it known what we want. Because more often than not, politicians tell us what the stakes are in every election. Well, this election's about immigration. This election's about the economy. This election is about, jobs not going overseas. And we go, yes, that's what this election's about. It's about guns. It's about abortion. It's about climate change. We're never the ones telling the politicians, this election's about term limits for Congress. And if you're on the side of it, then I'm going to vote for you. And I don't care if you're a Republican or a Democrat. I don't care if I've been a Republican since William Howard Taft got stuck in a bathtub in 1913. If you're a Republican who opposes term limits, I'm going to vote you out.
But they know it. But no. Hold on a second. Because if I'm the president and I come out and I give a speech and I'll be like, I'm going to advocate term limits, and I get into office, the Congress isn't going to give a shit about whether or not I advocated term limits, because I'm not going to put in an executive order. That's not going to fly.
It has to be a constitutional amendment.
So isn't term limits as an executive, as a presidential candidate, just a wish list thing? Because it's not
if you get on a train and go around the country talking about it. Politicians are cowards. And if my gun-toting congressman believes that he will lose if he doesn't support congressional term limits, guess what's going to happen? He's going to support congressional term limits.
So there has to be a tide that turns. It has to be you have to be Teddy. You have to be Teddy Roosevelt.
Yes.
And you have to whip the populace into a frenzy and say, we are not going to take this anymore.
And there has to be a call to action, because here's the thing is that politicians don't often ask us to do anything more than vote for them. Right?
Right.
That's all they ever ask us to do, because they have everything else. We send them the money automatically. All they want us to do is vote for them. They're not asking for anything else. If you're the president and you want congressional term limits, you get on a train or whatever, an RV, God help us, and you travel around the country and you say, listen, when you leave here today, in fact, you know what? You can do it while you're standing here. Email your senator right now and tell him you're going to vote against him if he's not in favor of congressional term limits in the next session. And you position term limits so that they don't take effect until the election year of 2036, which exempts most of the people in office right now. Will be like, well, I don't care, because I won't be in office by then anyway.
Okay.
Right? You make a deal that everybody can live with, and then you get the people to do the thing that we don't do anymore. Write your congressman. Tell him what you want.
Yeah.
Right? And every time you talk to anybody, you tell them, don't just nod your head and don't just applaud when I'm done talking. Get your phone out, email your congressman right now. You're going to vote against him.
So when are you running?
I'm not running.
You never? Not gonna?
No. Are you kidding? My
Third
mother.
party?
No. I mean, honestly, the only good thing about Donald Trump, no, there are lots of good things about Donald Trump. So I don't want to go down that road. But one of the good things that he did was a person of non-governmental and non-military experience made it to the White House.
Mm-hmm.
That means anyone can. You don't have to be qualified, which I think is the point that I would like to make to everybody since we're talking about presidents.
Yeah.
The number one president on every list that's ever come out is the one with the least governmental experience, Abe Lincoln. Just saying. That's a lesson for us. We don't have to have a guy who's been in the Senate for 50 years. We don't need a congressman. We don't need a governor. We don't need an Army Ranger. We don't need anybody who's done anything ever before, because there's no qualification to be president. There is no job that you can have that would prepare you for it. So what are the qualifications? It's the Truman Doctrine. Harry Truman was a guy who was able to make a decision. He was able to take advice from smart people. He was able to look at the entire chessboard. He was able to make his decision. He was able to commit to it. That's what made him a good president. Before that, he'd been a tailor.
What's the line? Can't sing, can't dance, might as well run for office. It's like something like that. Yeah.
Right. And so we have to change the qualifications for high office in this country. I don't care if you've been in the Army. I don't care if you've been a Marine. I don't care if you've run a business, because I got to tell you, there's nothing more incompatible than running a government like a business, because business has motivations that government doesn't have, and government has obligations that businesses wouldn't touch.
Yeah, there's such a cop-out.
It is a cop-out. It's the same like when they ran Wesley Clark for president because he'd been the commander of NATO and all this other stuff. Being a general, some of our worst presidents have been generals.
That's what they always say. That they always say, well, I know what it feels like to send men into battle, so I'll bring that into the White House. And I'm like, I understand that, but I think I don't think there's anybody who'd be cavalier. I would even say Trump wouldn't be cavalier, being like, I'm going to send these boys off to get killed.
No.
I think any human being who has a conscience would be in that office and think twice before they push the drone button or whatever. Although there are stories that Obama enjoyed the drone a little bit more than he kind of let on, well, because it's too easy, but yeah, who would you trust in the White House of the people that well? No one.
Is there any?
Nobody. Pretty much just you.
Okay. And we only just met. That's pretty good. I should do all right on the stump.
I don't know. I've never thought about that. Like, even people I respect.
This is the question, and I feel like you should put this out on your website. Put out a little poll.
Mm-hmm.
What qualities make for a good president? I'd like to hear that answer.
The first thing that pops to mind, and then I almost scold myself as soon as I think of it: honesty. Boom. And there's a moment that pops into my head. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? Because one, none of them are. And two, I think you have to have a little bit of an ability to gild the lily in order to be in politics.
Well, and there are things you can't tell people, right? Like the show you did on UFOs. You don't think that there's presidents walking around with some kind of inside knowledge about aliens and all that they just can't tell people?
Oh, God.
Right. And even Abe Lincoln, our greatest president, and overall seeming such a wonderful guy, right? Yeah. But suspended habeas corpus. And, he was a hard guy when he had to be.
There's a story about him when there was a couple of newspaper reporters put out a fake story in order to say that he was going to conscript, to draft like 100,000 people or whatever it was. And then the White House said, no, that's not true. But actually Lincoln had been looking to draft people, and he was able to use it as like a canary in the coal mine to see
how it would go.
Yeah.
Right. Well, and I think Bill Clinton's PR people did kind of the same thing, where they would find some other way to get it out there just to kind of test it.
Oh, he loved polls.
Yeah, but it was more with social media now, you can do it even better. You can float any idea you want, and you can have 13 degrees of separation from it just to see what the people think. Yeah. But ultimately, I don't want a president who poll tests things. I want somebody. I mean, the reason I didn't like Aaron Burr and Donald Trump is because I was looking for core convictions and I wasn't finding any. What is it that you believe, Donald Trump? And his answer is, I believe whatever will get me elected or get me what I want, right? But when I ask the same question to Joe Biden, I'm not getting a real clear ringing bell kind of answer either.
No.
And so it's not honesty that you're necessarily looking for. You kind of want some core beliefs, because when the chips are down and everything's on fire, your core beliefs will not desert you. That's why they're core beliefs. And I'm looking for that in a president. And we've had presidents where you kind of knew where they stood, and they were willing to be unpopular, and they were willing to lose in order to hold up their beliefs. John Adams ranks #1 in the presidential list for integrity, because he could have taken the easy way out and got reelected, and he'd said, no, I'm going to do the right thing, and lost. You know, you want somebody who is unswervingly dedicated to the good of the country.
We have some of that when it comes to Republican presidents, when it comes to abortion, because I mean, right now we're dealing with the potential of Roe v. Wade being overturned by the Supreme Court, and there's a lot of people who think there's a very good chance of it happening. But that's a decision of the courts. That's a decision of the states. That's a decision. Even Congress isn't involved, because it's not, at this point, it's not federal law. It's a state thing. But you would elect a president, a Republican, you might believe 95% of in line with what he believes, but he believes in restricting abortion. Well, he can believe that, but he doesn't have the active power. He can't go write an executive order. He doesn't have the active power, but that's his personal belief. Well, I don't have to agree with his personal belief on that, because there's nothing he can do about it.
Well, and if your belief comes from a place of thoughtfulness and sincerity, I have to take it seriously, even if I don't agree with it. Right.
If it's a religious thing or
if it's a religious thing, or if it's a moral thing, you know, Teddy Roosevelt, when he finally left the White House, he said that his administration had been one of morals. He believed in doing the right thing, and he stuck to it. And that was persuasive. So in 1904, on election night, he said, being Teddy, I promise not to run for president ever again. And everybody was like, oh, well, that's interesting, because you're like 46 years old. And you're good at it, so why would you stop, right? And, you know, later on, he said if he could cut off his left hand and take it back, he would. But he did it. He could have been renominated in 1908 without lifting a finger, and he kept fighting it. That's a guy who does what he says he's going to do. He keeps his promises, right? Even his friends are like, dude, you should run again, because you'll never be the same if you don't. And it ruined the whole rest of his life. And I think he knew it. It split the Republican Party. It paved the way for Woodrow Wilson, World War I, and everything that led up to the Depression. And he knew it. And he stuck to his guns.
Yeah.
You kind of want somebody who says, these are my principles and I'm going to adhere to them, even if they're unpopular and even if you don't like them, because that's what the rest of us have to do. We get up every day, we go to work at a job maybe we don't like. We do what we have to do to get done the things we have to get done. And it would be good to see our leaders doing the same thing. And, you know, like John McCain, when he came out and said things like, you know what, those jobs aren't coming back. You know, some of the manufacturing jobs, whenever John McCain came out and told people the truth, there was the initial wave of, oh my God, he's so terrible. But then you just got to wait it out, because 20 minutes later, they're like, you know what, we kind of respect a guy who's going to tell us the truth.
That happened. Remember when he did the guy stood up at the town hall, or I'm sorry, I think it was a woman who stood up at the town hall and said Obama's a terrorist, he's and he stopped her, a Muslim.
Yes.
And he stopped her. He said, no, I met him, he's a good man, we don't agree with each other on everything, but he loves this country, he believes in it. We just disagree. And there were a lot of people who from the right who pushed back, like, how dare you even do that? And then there were other people who kind of came around and said, wow, he's being civil. Imagine.
Well, and honest, right? I mean, if he thought that Obama was a secret terrorist, he would have said that, because that's the guy he was. We need a president who looks at the world, or at least the country, the way we do. I've got neighbors on each side of my house who are deep red Republicans, right? But we're not building barricades. We can talk, we can agree on things. Most Americans can. And you have to approach it the right way. You have to say, this is bad for the country. I think we can all agree on that. Here's my idea of how to fix it. If you got a better idea, I would love to hear it, but this is what I'm going to do unless somebody stops me. And by the way, the people lined up to stop me are automatically in the position of wanting to keep doing what we've already established is bad for the country. You've got to pick the top level issues to hang your hat on. And as time has moved on, I mean, back in the 40s, they would debate how many angels could dance on the head of a pin, but that time is past now. You have to pick the biggest issues on the horizon. The national debt is too high, healthcare sucks, and disunity is destroying the country.
Okay, so then, and this is really a danger of veering into some weird territory, but there are those who looked at Biden and said, Biden, it needs to be anybody but Trump. And Biden was the one who rose as the most electable out of the field of Democrats. And they said, okay, we have more of a chance to win than we've ever had, because of this situation. So that's how there's a theory out there that part of the reason that Harris was picked as the running mate was because it was such a sure thing that Biden was going to win. So now is an opportunity to get a woman into the vice presidency because Biden has such a chance to win. So if you take these opportunities and instead of saying, okay, it's about the unity of the country, we're going to pull everybody together and try and put a Band-Aid on this and get us all to work together. If a party says, well, we have an opportunity to push our agenda even further because we are going to win, whether or not you believe, I don't have a problem with, yes, women should be able to be president. Women should be able to be vice president. I don't have an issue with that. Is she qualified? That's a whole other discussion.
Oh, we haven't ascertained what the qualifications are. So
for vice president, or
until we do that,
right. But then you're using your situation versus healing and trying to become that statesman to just get the agenda of your platform, and you're alienating other people. Right. You're not bringing people together. You're using it's not any different than when Republicans get into office and they say, well, now I can get Cheney in and Cheney can get his crazy agenda that he's got.
Well, and if you notice, everything that each party accuses the other side of doing is what they themselves are already doing.
Oh, it's like somebody who accuses their partner of cheating because they know that they are capable of cheating.
Right. Political opportunism, it's like, oh my God, it looks like you just want to get elected so that you'll have electoral power. And they go, but we'll couch that in different phraseology. But yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah.
Joe Biden should have picked a Republican as his running mate.
That would have been incredible.
If you want unity, how else do you do it than picking somebody of the opposite party to be the number 2 guy? If Joe Biden, John Kasich.
Oh. See, there's a multiple of choices out there.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Because what you have to say, if you're a Democrat running for president, you have to admit the truth, which is Republican values are American values. Fiscal responsibility, strong foreign policy, a sense of morality. Those are all things, those are ideas we want at the table where the decisions get made. We want a Republican in the room where it happens, and not just Secretary of Agriculture, right? We want to, since I forget when the powerful VP came along, but they, where they've essentially been a co-president. Joe Biden should have picked a Republican and said, this is going to be my person, and they're going to run the country with me, and everybody's beliefs and ideas and feelings are going to get equal time. That's what unity is.
That would have been earth-shattering. Like, that would have shaken the entire system.
Teddy Roosevelt would have done it. Well, that's what I'm saying.
McCain
that's
was
my lesson. That is my lesson to you, is that and all politicians, right? If you want term limits, if you want to drain the swamp, you implement term limits. If you want unity, the other side has to share in the governing, and legitimately, not just a figurehead.
Yeah.
Like we achieve our best results when people argue with us, when people give us the opposing viewpoints. If you're sitting in a room where everyone's agreeing with you, you're not getting anywhere. So if a Republican wins the nomination in 2024, he should pick a Democrat as his running mate, because that will communicate to the country, we're serious about this. We are serious about unifying the country around the most important issues facing the country. And this is how we're going to do it.
But do you think that that's a wonderful laboratory experiment, but will it happen in reality outside the vacuum?
It takes courage.
Yeah.
That's all.
What would Teddy Roosevelt do?
Teddy Roosevelt would do it.
I need the little bracelet.
Here's a guy who shot himself in the foot more times than not, right?
Yeah.
But he always did it thinking he was doing the right thing. And everybody else was like, yeah, we think you're doing the right thing too. You might want to bandage that foot up because it's bleeding. But your heart's in the right place. You're coming from a good spot. And if you fail, we're still with you. And that is the essence of presidential leadership. Even if you lose, we're still with you. Lincoln, in early Civil War time, he was not winning. The Union was not winning. It looked like the best outcome was going to be two separate countries on the same continent. Mm-hmm. And most moderates were okay with that, right? And Lincoln said, no, we're not doing it, and I won't permit it. And he was the one, he brought the rest of the country around. He made radicals out of the moderates because he said the Union cannot be split, and we'll die for it. And everybody said, well, I guess we will then. Presidential leadership.
I think a split ticket like that has more of a possibility than a viable third party candidate.
From a certain point of view, it is a third party, isn't it?
It is, in a way. It is.
Right. So for people who want a third party, and people who want unity, and people who want to make sure that their ideas get heard, this is their answer. Because most people, when they vote now, they're voting between two unappetizing choices. Mm-hmm. And when you're given unappetizing choices, you'll default to partisanship. Well, I'm a registered Democrat, so I'm going to vote for the Democrat and hold my nose while I do it, right? But if you could give them cover by saying, oh, well, John Kasich's going to be vice president, I could probably go for that.
Yeah.
If you believed that the guy at the top of the ticket was sincere in saying that we're going to have opposing viewpoints in the room where the decisions get made, we are going to incorporate the policy agendas of both sides in this administration, and we're going to focus on the big things we agree on first. And you know what? Once we knock those out, we'll get down to the B level. But this guy who believes what you believe will always be in the room, and I'm always going to listen to him.
When was it? It was in the early 1800s where they changed it, where the second.
Yeah, 1800.
It was at 1800. Oh, wow, good for me.
It was Aaron Burr was the guy who said, you know what, enough of this.
Yeah, because it used to be the person who placed second in the vote. So
right.
So we had presidents who were in those first couple who were different backgrounds.
Well, so George Washington and John Adams were the same party, but the next administration was Adams and Jefferson, who were diametrically opposed. And then you had Jefferson and Burr, and then it stopped. But the problem is that the president has the ability to shut the VP out, which I think you're seeing now, because there's all these stories about how Harris is in a room by herself.
Oh,
she's not making policy decisions. So the thing is that the president has the power to shut the VP out. You have to be able to say, I'm not going to do that. And you know what? You're all going to be watching. And if I have a press conference and the VP is not sitting next to me, then you know I lied to you.
Mm-hmm.
But and you know what? He'll tell you. Anytime he wants, the VP can go on any news show that he wants. He can go on Fox News and say that he's being shut out of policy. But if he's telling the truth, he'll have to admit he's got a seat at the table, and everything he says gets listened to and acted on.
Well, we're going to have to see if this happens, because I think it'd be very interesting.
It would.
Stacey, thanks so much for coming and talking shop with me again.
Well, I tend to rant.
That's what the show's all about. It was a lot of fun to visit. It's I mean, the show is constantly a chance for me to, I've said this to you before. It's like, well, what am I thinking? And then it hangs out there like a thought bubble, and I have to actually take responsibility for my thoughts. So you're good at that. You're good at like, hold on. What about that? What would Teddy Roosevelt do?
Yeah.
So I think that's a bracelet. I think it's one of those, what would Jesus do? What would Teddy Roosevelt do? I think you should start selling those on your show.
Selling those on my show, yeah.
So Stacey Roberts, History's Trainwrecks. Check it out. We run ads for it, and there's a reason we do. So thanks so much for another chat about the world of politics. And catch Stacey on Side Road. We're going to do a special episode about podcasting and what we've learned in the last couple months, and see if we can pick each other's brains. So we'll go do that. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Stacey, for hanging out.
Thank you.
All right.
Support comes from the History's Trainwrecks podcast that focuses on stories like a temper tantrum that changed history, the president who promised not to run again and regretted it for the rest of his life, the World War II general who lost his pants on a secret mission in enemy territory. The History's Trainwrecks podcast, available now.
Hey, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the show. Help us spread the word by subscribing and leaving a review. If you want to support us even more, you can find a link to our Patreon account in the show notes. And if you're one of our diehard fans, head on over to the VikingDogStore.com, where you can find official Open Highway merchandise to show your support to the entire world. But most of all, thanks for listening.
For the highways of America, which for so many years were an assortment of as many designs and pavements as there were states, are now becoming one big road that can take you anywhere faster, safer, and more directly than ever before. What is this big road? Where is it going? How much has been built? How much is yet to come? These are questions we ask. Certainly traveling the entire system would be a memorable experience, but few of us have the time for such a trip.
All rights reserved. Viking Dog 2021.